Ross Johnson, welcome to the WP Minute.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Here to talk about all things why I still run a WordPress agency in the year 2025.
I ask myself that quite often, to be honest.
How long have you been running your agency?
Quite a while. I officially registered it was a DBA initially in like 2005. I think I had like one project early 2005 that didn't go well, big surprise, and then really didn't pick it back up until maybe early 2006. So kind of pushing officially 20 years now, which is wild to say. I'm feeling pretty old.
Nice. Lots has changed. Lots have stayed the same. And, to like frame that, like, of course, like technology has changed, like the politics of WordPress have changed. Competitors have come into the space like AI have changed. But I would also argue that like servicing customers, even in the face of all that, has probably stayed kind of similar to like when things started, air quotes, 20 years ago. And I want to dive into all of that. But before we do, let's give you the kudos first. Where can folks go to find more about you and your agency? What's the best place that they should visit?
I think just our website, which is 3.7designs.co. 3.7designs.co. So it's 3.7 designs. And we officially own 7designs.co, and 3 is a subdomain.
Nice. So 20 years ago, WordPress was quite different. You were servicing customers that were, well, I'll let you define it. Did you cast a wide net like I did and just pull anything back onto the boat that said yes? And how did that like change over time for you?
Yeah, pretty much. When you're starting off, and I was pretty young, I was in my kind of mid 20s at the time. It was really basically anybody who would say yes. I was positioning myself more as like a designer at the time, even though I had a strong background in technology, and like my first client was more or less a website. Like I was doing IT, and when you're doing IT in the 90s, they're like, well, you do the website too. And I found I enjoyed that a lot more than like troubleshooting email. But I was more of a designer. There's like the direction I was going in, but it ended up being more and more web. Like that's where, kind of based on my age and getting into the market, like a lot of the clients I was running into wanted to hire more of like a bigger professional design company compared to a 20-year-old to do like their branding. But they had no problem handing off the website because that was new. But yeah, to start, it was just anybody who said yes. So it was all over the board. And then, it's interesting how it changes, and everybody says you should niche down, and we're kind of only getting to that point now. But your clientele always changes, right? Like I'm sure you experience the same thing. Like the first people you're talking to, even if you're not picking an industry, compared to like who you are talking to like a year or 2 years or 3 years, like their characteristics change, and that's certainly what we were experiencing.
Yeah, it's hard to prepare for. It's hard for me to even like illustrate the advice for an agency owner. I kind of look at it as like you do 80% of your like core work, let's say on a given week or month, but then like 20% of that time, I think a good agency owner is also like experimenting, either with like experimenting with a new kind of customer, or like a customer in a different market, or experimenting with like how you're adjusting your own marketing and sales pitch, and like adjusting like, oh, maybe we should, we'll use Gravity Forms, my employer, as an example. Like maybe, well, never do this at home, kids. Like maybe we should be thinking about another plugin we should use in its place. And you're like experimenting with like another suite of tools, which helps like find that customer. Is that 80-20 rule? Does that stick with you, or how do you?
I would say so. Generally, that sounds about right. Like things are always changing. And, one of the mindsets we have over at the agency is that, nothing is perfect. Like everything's basically a first draft. So like everything's on the table to change. And it's almost like every time you go through a project, you should be thinking about like what went well and what didn't go well, and trying to identify places to improve. And that includes new tooling. It's interesting as the plugin market has really kind of exploded, and I guess over the last 10 years, it's not something new, but some of the plugins out there that were just like the only go-to solution, like Gravity Forms or Yoast or something like that. Now there's a lot of really good competitors out there. And, for us, we found for a long time, we're kind of using those same plugins and then realizing we should try some of these other ones because they might be a better fit for our clients, or they might be more efficient. And yeah, there is kind of that element of figuring out how do you do that experimentation. Like, are you doing it on a client project site, which you could do, but there's certain risks to that. But you could also kind of have your own test projects or some sort of process for trying them out and evaluating them.
Yeah. I'm fresh off the heels of a podcast I just recorded with Mark Zemansky, and we were trying to break down the definition of WordPress professional, because I think he probably takes offense is probably not the right word, but he wants folks to be like, look, you can't just keep saying you're a WordPress professional if you only do these things. And by these things, commonly thrown around, if you're not using GitHub and version control for your projects, you're not a professional. If you're using a page builder, you're not a professional. I see it as different, maybe tiers of professionalism. That sort of, that sort of unfold throughout your experience. And let me just hit you with this GitHub and revision control thing, because this was something too. When I started my agency, it was just hey, can you build a website for me? Yeah. And you start hacking together WordPress,
right.
And then you discover themes, and you're this theme is a great starter theme. But then you realize a year later, these $69 themes that you're buying from Theme Forest don't come with any true support. And then you discover,
right.
Let's say Genesis and Studio Press, and you're there's a whole team behind this. And you're okay, this makes sense. And then you load onto that, right? And then page builders come, right? And then you realize oh my God, I'm building a big project with multiple people who are working on it. I probably need this thing called version control, right? So it's just this long learning journey. But I wonder if you can unpack why people maybe point at version control as that next level of being a professional.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm more along the lines of my thought process as you are. I don't think we should exclude anybody based on a very specific skill set, especially if we're using terms as broad as WordPress professional. In my opinion, if you're getting paid to deliver value through WordPress, you're a WordPress professional. If you have some skills there, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're a developer who writes code and uses version control. These days I don't do a lot of writing of code or using GitHub or version control, but I could still consider myself in many ways a WordPress professional. Or even if you were to look at people who have a WordPress plugin business, a lot of them are not developers who are using version control. Are they still WordPress professionals? So I think if I had to guess, as far as why does that get picked out singularity, it might be that a lot of the evolution in WordPress might have started with developers. And so there is this sense that you're not really using the platform to its full extent if you're not kind of a certain level in the weeds of getting under the hood and actually writing code and committing it.
Yeah, I think there's this. As I was explaining to Mark on the podcast, it's a feat. The whole version control thing is a feature of a professional,
right?
So, and generally it's associated with that higher ticket project, because you're really not using if you're building a quick 5-page portfolio site for a local bakery, you're probably not syncing it up to GitHub and having a repo, right? It's very easy to be oh, that website over there is, when they call in for support, your team knows oh yeah, it's Cadence. You just log in and you change the font. They want that change the font to 18 point. Okay, just log into Cadence. But then if you have an enterprise client who you've built this bespoke app for with WordPress integrated into some ERP system that they have, and they ask for a support request, well, you're not messing around with undocumented changes for that customer over there. So your support team is going to go, well, let's just see, like, okay, we're going to make a change and we're going to commit it to the repo and it's going to go to the testing site. And then we'll send that testing site link to the customer and say, is this what you wanted, enterprise customer who pays me a lot of money? And they say, yes, that's it. And you go, okay. And you commit that branch to the main branch of their production site, right? And there's a whole process there. Even if it was just an H1 that you changed.
Right.
That's the process, because that's what they're paying you for. Having said all of that, is that how you box customers in your agency world? Like, do you have like those smaller clients and bigger clients, and are the expectations and the process different?
Yeah, I would say to some extent. I mean, it's not as big maybe as what you're describing, those two examples. But yeah, certainly we've got one client that's like exactly like you described, where if we're going to make any small change, it has to go through like multiple steps of, we're pushing it. We're working on it in a dev site. We push it to staging. They have to review it there. Then it has to be accessibility tested. There has to be a security scan. Then we can't deploy the code. We put in a ticket, and then they deploy the code. And then there's like a testing process after that. And then we have other clients that, they're just like, do it. Like, they have the controls. They could log in. They know how to change it, but that's not what they want to do with their time. And it's interesting. It's not necessarily, for us, because we don't work with like a whole lot of like really big enterprise clients, like Fortune, 500 sort of clients. But, there isn't like a huge distinction between how much they're paying and their expectations. It's more just kind of how their IT department seems to, like, how much they care or want to have their hands in the process. But that's just us personally. But, to take a step back real quickly, you were talking about, version control and those two different examples. And it occurs to me, like, it's an interesting question of, like, how do we even define version control? Because, is using the backup system in your managed hosting version control? I mean, if you have a mostly database-driven website like something built in Cadence, I'd argue it is. So are we kind of narrowing down that, like, you're not a professional unless you're using like this very specific type of version control? And I think that's, pretty exclusionary. I think there's a lot of professionals out there doing great work who aren't necessarily even need to do that.
I came up with like the 3 C's of professionalism, which made sense in my head when I came up with it, but now it doesn't make as much sense as when I say it out loud 10 minutes later. But like the 3 C's of like you care first and foremost, like it, presenting the question of like what makes up a WordPress professional, or I guess any professional in my eyes, is like you care about the work that you're doing. Number one, like that means that like this is a pursuit. We said the 80-20 thing before. It's like that right there is like the evolution of caring. Like I care about the work that I'm putting out because it satisfies me, it satisfies, others, and I'm constantly like trying to make this thing better. I care about the work. Second C is like I care about the customer, right? Like I care that this work that I am constantly refining, this craft, I'm constantly refining, like I'm putting that to good use for the customer. And they're asking me questions, I'm answering it. Can I solve this for you with the stuff that I know? Yes. And if not, maybe you should be saying no in that second phase and saying like, hey, customer, like what you're asking for is not me. Maybe I'll go find somebody else for you, but it's not us. And that's like caring about the customer. And then the third C is just like you care about your own business. Like you care about the sustainability of your business so that all this hard work you've put, into learning the first C, when you're applying that to caring for the customer, it's profitable, right? And it's there so you can survive, so the business can be there to serve that customer, not just now for the website, but a year, 2 years, 5 years later. I'm sure you have customers that have been with you forever since you started your agency. And that's an important thing. That's how I've defined it, those 3 C's. Would you add to that, or do you see it a different way?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't necessarily add to that. I mean, the way I typically think about it is, if you are, if you're delivering value and showing up for the customer and you're reliable and helping them accomplish their goals, it really doesn't matter about like how you're going about it. I think those things are what define you as a professional, not necessarily like the process or the tools or the techniques.
Yeah. Where do you land? We were chatting before we hit record. Where do you land on the page builder landscape? Is that something that you incorporate into your workflow? Is everything built by hand crafted by hand in the central north of the United States. How do you use page builders for you?
Yeah, this is something that like just in the last few months we're exploring shifting. So for the longest time, everything was completely custom. Like we had our own custom theme, that was a iteration of underscores. And, before Gutenberg blocks, we were building mostly like complex layouts with ACF. And then a few years ago, we decided to lean into, block-based layouts and started extending and building our own custom blocks. And we kind of got to a point maybe last year where, it occurred to us that why are we reinventing the wheel? Like we're spending a lot of time and money, both our clients' money and agency money, like building and extending these tools, these custom blocks, when there's better solutions out there than what we were building for much less. Like, GeneratePress, for example, you can get Generate blocks, I think, for like $100 a year, which is like less than one billable hour, for a client. And the amount of time and effort put into, that solution and the amount of testing that's been done compared to ours is just like, it doesn't even compare. So, with that, and also looking at, I know a lot of people don't love, block themes currently, but like that is a direction. In other platforms that are gaining traction, like Webflow, like personally, I see that as like the future of building websites. I think there's going to be less and less hand coding websites and layouts in CSS, just across the board, not just websites, but even web applications. Like AI at some point is going to be able to take a Figma file and or whatever we're using right at the time, and just build the layouts itself. Like we won't necessarily need somebody to be doing that.
Right. Do you remember how did you come about making that decision to be like, we've got our own tooling, we've been using it for, 10 years, and now we're going to switch to a more, what I'll call retail product?
Basically, every single project we quote, we went way over budget. And it didn't matter like how many hours we'd throw at it. We just keep adding more and more and more, and we'd always go over budget. And it was almost always in the development time and the QA time, because the amount of things that we would find that need resolution, because everything was custom built for that site. So, kind of after looking at it,
you'd go over budget. You'd go over budget on your own hours that you scoped out for the project.
Right.
You weren't taking it over budget for your client. You were just eating
exactly.
that cost.
Yeah, exactly. And not like a little bit. Like there were times we'd be hundreds of hours over.
Wow.
And so we kind of had to say like, well, we need to do something about this, and spend some time kind of analyzing, what is contributing to this. And part of it was, reinventing the wheel all the time. And also, just not having the internal time in an agency to like really build our own product, so to speak. Like we weren't going to get into like the custom page builder space because that's so competitive that you'd have to dedicate like your entire company to that. So that didn't make sense to like invest in it to that level. To get it to a place, to make our own page builders, essentially to the place where we wouldn't be losing money, every time we built a site, like getting into that level. And so, we started looking at other solutions, and, I did a few tests to see like how long did it take me to build out, a layout that we did, that we custom built using, various page builders. And it was like 10% of the time, like it would take me 3 hours compared to like 10, for what we did custom.
And what was what did custom look like? Because I think it's important that folks who are just living in we're in a whole new cohort, you and I. Yeah. Or there's a whole new cohort now. Like you and I are old. We've been doing this for sadly, a while, yeah. And what we haven't, I think, what the mistake that a lot of us have made that have been here for a while is there's like a whole new cohort of people who are building and delivering websites who are developers. Consider themselves developers in the sense that you and I consider ourselves developers because we used to handwrite code in Notepad++, way back in the day. But now there's a whole cohort that have come in because of like Elementor, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how they've developed websites. And they are developers. It's just like a different way of developing WordPress websites. And I'm saying all that because I think people are like, oh, I did it. We've been doing it custom. A lot of people think that they're doing it custom with Elementor or a page builder. So what does custom look like where you were like, oh man, we're going 10, 20, 100 hours over doing it our custom way? What did that look like?
Yeah, no, that's a very important distinction because you can build completely custom websites using Elementor or any of these page builders. Like, that's what's great about them is they don't really do a whole lot of restricting of what you're building. You're not starting from something and trying to iterate on top of it. So what custom meant to us is, yeah, we had this like very bare bones theme based on underscores. So you install it and there's no colors, barely any typography, no layout, nothing. And then on top of that, we had kind of our own set of custom WordPress blocks, including like some extensions to some of the existing blocks. So like we'd add certain settings to like the columns and group blocks, stuff like that. But essentially we're looking at a blank page, and rather than configuring and building the front end of the site through the admin like you would with a page builder, we're writing everything custom, like custom template files in HTML and custom CSS to build all these layouts and in the front end. So almost everything was done in code. Not almost nothing. Over time, like more and more got to be done in the browser because we were using blocks. But a vast majority of it was actually writing code versus using a user interface. And I don't think using a user interface means you're not a developer. I mean, it might mean you're not like a software engineer. But I still think you're developing a website, you're building it.
Yeah. What did that mean? What did the custom side? What else was the expense of the custom side? Was it just writing the code custom every time the customer had the request where you realize, man, we're way over budget with this internally? Was it collaborating, like maybe you have a back-end developer who starts developing a feature. Now that person goes off on vacation, somebody else has to hop in and pick up from where they left off. And there was overhead there of catching up with the project and, understanding like where the code was. What other challenges did you face with custom coding other than just the features that you were building, if any?
Yeah, certainly the more developers that we'd have on a single project, it would add a lot more hours. We could potentially move faster because people could be working on things concurrently. But there's a lot more coordination that's needed. So typically we'd have like a lead developer who's kind of overseeing the project, and then they would delegate components to the other developers. But that requires a lot of documentation and getting people up to speed and filling in context. And then there's a lot of coordination to even discuss like, okay, I'm done with this, you're ready to merge it in, and then like code reviews and that sort of thing. So that certainly added a whole lot of time. Also, and this is still a challenge that we're going to run into, but trying to kind of not have what's called scope seep. So, if you're not familiar with it, scope creep is when the client is asking for features or additional work and you're not charging for them. Scope seep is when you're introducing it yourself. And we had that issue quite a lot where, we're all really passionate about what we do, and we kind of be working on something and think like, it'd just be like that much better if we did like this, additional, little bit of work on it. And that can really, really snowball really quickly. Like, we're working on a custom login screen. There's so many components potentially associated with that. There's like the reset state, like, what do the error messages look like? What happens after you log in? What's the page you land on? And so if you haven't scoped like this kind of full end-to-end journey of designing and building this custom login workflow, there's more just trying to skin the WordPress one. You can spend a lot more time there, and it's great for the client. And obviously you want to over deliver, but you can sink a lot of hours if you're not careful there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yes, definitely have done that. Certainly in the past. I'm wondering, I know this is kind of early on in what I'll call your experiment, but I'm wondering if this opens up the custom side as an opportunity for the business. In other words, now that you've kind of like found some efficiencies with using an off-the-shelf solution, which is weird to say in WordPress in the year 2025, but you find these efficiencies with the off-the-shelf solution. I wonder if now you can also like go to the customer and say, hey, look, here's the price. and in this price, we're using this air quotes framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're using this already made framework. We've done it before in the past, and these are the things that we can do with it. But as soon as you try to like break that, either with scope creep or you're like cool new features that we can build for this, it has to be custom. And now custom is, maybe where you were at before, but like 20%, 30% more on the line item, because now you've realized, oh God, when we go this route, we're generally that 20 to 30% over as we've been in the past. So I'm curious if you're going to look at that as a new opportunity, if you've not already started doing that.
Yeah, that is exactly our expectation. I mean, the type of projects that we take on, usually there is some custom development that's needed, like from a back-end logic perspective. Like we're working on a project now that needs like a very particular membership management workflow that like WooCommerce memberships isn't a good fit. Some of the other ones that we're looking at, like it just has to work exactly how they need it. So that's something we're going to build custom. And most of our projects, there's something like that, but it's going to be, that much more narrow window. And because we are still thinking we're going to do like a block-based page builder, we do expect to have like custom blocks here and there. Like we'll still need to design something that doesn't fit in like the off-the-shelf, block-based page builders that are out there. But the real opportunity that we're looking at as far as opening up for us is being able to sell more marketing services. So in like 2018, we became more of a full service digital marketing agency, which was like really transformational for the agency because we stopped chasing like the one big ticket projects and started chasing retainers. And as far as like scaling an agency, like predictable revenue is, so important. So because we can spend less upfront on the website, then we can pitch them on, okay, let's spend some additional money on getting the right people to your site, driving leads, driving conversions. And our experience is once you get people into a retainer, they really see the value. And even if they only plan on doing it for a year to see how it goes, like they tend to stick around.
I'm curious if you think, this is a great segue, because this is what I was going to kind of lead into next, is I'm wondering if you're seeing the front end of a project, and not the literal and the technical term, like front end versus back end, but like the front house of accepting a project, like scope it, quote it, it's whatever, $20,000, and then here's the 3 payment milestones. Like I'm wondering if you're seeing that kind of like go away because you're experiencing efficiencies with tools around WordPress. Maybe the clients are starting to understand, like maybe clients now in the year 2025 have gone through a few iterations of their website, so they kind of know what they're looking for now. Like they're not dragging you down with a bunch of like discovery and scope stuff anymore. So I'm wondering if you're seeing a world where, it's going to be a startup fee and then a monthly retainer to build websites for folks or build solutions for folks.
Yeah, I'd like to see it go in that direction. And there was a period of time where we're really trying to push this idea of HubSpot actually came up with it, but like a launchpad website, meaning like the minimum amount of work you need to do to get a website up, like a new version of your website up. Like you don't necessarily have to rebuild the whole thing and have it launched day one, but like what's something better we can get up quickly, and then you move into a retainer to iterate on it every month and kind of get it to where you want it to be. We as an agency struggle with that for the same reasons of the scope seep. Like we had a hard time of like moderating ourselves and not just delivering something that they're like, yeah, I'm good. We don't need to spend any more money on it. But I do think that's a much better approach. What we've been doing lately that kind of works to solve the same issue is discovery first projects where, we're not trying to quote the entire project all at once because a lot of times you just guess wrong. Like there's just not enough time in the typical sales process to get all the details right. So we're kind of breaking off that first portion of, the discovery, the strategy, and sometimes all the way through the design concepts. So we have a very clear picture of what we're building. We'll do functional specifications and that sort of thing if there's any custom logic that's needed. And then quote for the rest, which gives the client typically a better solution. You don't have to pad the price as much. You don't have as much issues as running over. And that's been working really well for both us and our clients.
Yeah. It can't be, understated enough that the recurring revenue for an agency is critical. for sustainability of the business. Again, going back to my 3 C's, like you should be thinking about that. Again, not just from like I mean, it is, but so not just like how much money can we make, or like what else can I sell this customer, but it is for, that. I've always said agency life is one paycheck away from bankruptcy. Somebody else had said that to me years ago, because depending on like how you've structured the agency, like if you don't have that runway, that's something that, December, right? Holiday season. Nobody's saying yes to a contract. No one's answering your emails. People all have time off. Like your own team wants time off, obviously. And it's like the worst month, November, December. You're just like, you're operating at the halfway point. This is how I was. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's why I couldn't sustain, the size team that I had. You halfway through the summer, you're like, okay, what are we projecting for holiday season, right? For that downtime of like no projects and no revenue in, you start selling for the next year, right? So you start selling for, okay, as soon as we come back from holiday season, who's giving us, the down payments on the new projects, slated to go, the next year. And, that was a super stressful cycle. I'm sure it still is a stressful cycle for people. And that's why that recurring revenue is so important. And sometimes it can be like, gamified, I think is a word that I might throw out there. Like everyone's like, you got to get that recurring revenue. Buy my $97 a month course to tell you how to do it, and you're just like, okay, what am I doing? Like, but there's a vital reason for it, Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense, or that was like a bit of a soapbox moment, but that's like it's a tough thing to make people understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're really going to struggle to scale your agency and have a team on payroll if you don't have recurring revenue for all the reasons that you say. Like you're just chasing the next big project, hope that it comes in and that you have enough. And if one of them doesn't work out, then you're in trouble. Right. And I mean, you should have some reserves. Like I think there's some estimates of like 3 to 6 months of runway, and like a line of credit's a good idea, but those are all things you don't want to have to tap into. So really focusing on that reoccurring revenue, even if it means, having a bit of a loss in the beginning to get them into that reoccurring, retainer, I think that's worth it. And I guess the last thing I'll say on that is, a lot of times when people, especially in the WordPress space, talk about reoccurring revenue, they say like, oh, sell site care. And like, maintenance and backups and updates, which like, I think is great. Like start there. But if you look at the prices of those, like maybe you might charge a couple $100, and that's maybe on the high end. Like how many clients do you have to get at that price point to hire like one person to manage it for you? It's a lot. Yeah. So you need to be thinking about higher value services that clients are going to pay and get ROI on every month.
That's a fantastic point. And I think that's like what I was getting at is a lot of people will throw that around. Right. And it's just like, oh, it's so easy. And it's like, yes. And yes, it is, a good first step, but you should, trust me, as you're scaling it, you want to think, bigger. Which leads me to my next question, sort of in the back half of this conversation is like, how has finding customers changed, if at all? I assume referral is still top of the food chain for agency life, as it is with like a lot of things in the real world, referrals. But how have you adjusted to find new customers and like even reposition yourself?
Yeah, I mean, finding customer acquisition, I think, is always a challenge with an agency because there's just so many agencies out there, and I think it's gotten harder over the years. Like we did a whole lot of local business, like outside of referrals. A lot of our business was local for a long time, basically up until COVID. And then it seemed like once COVID hit and everyone went virtual, there was kind of this universal shift in thinking where it's like, we don't need to work local anymore because we're not even going to meet you in person. And it seemed like that hasn't really changed much. So for us, we've been fortunate that our referral network is really strong. Strategic partnerships have always been really huge for us. So finding other agencies or services that complement yours and referring work back and forth. That's a good way to get your foot in the door with a lot of work. And then just having a really strong network in general, which might be easier or harder these days. But like the more people virtually or in person, the more likely they are to know somebody who needs help. And so we've gotten a ton of work just sustain based on people I've met like 10 years ago, 15 years ago that are still connected with me on LinkedIn, and they see me post now and again. So they have a project come up and they think of us. The other way you can go about it in talking to other agency owners is really just focus on a lot of outbound sales. Like, we're more waiting for clients to reach out and come to us. We do some proactive marketing, but we're not doing cold outreach. We're not doing a lot of trying to connect with people and discuss their issues. It's more like waiting for people to raise their hands. But if that's not working, I think you really have to start hustling and getting in contact with people and asking for referrals and all that.
Yeah, I think, and we'll transition to talking about AI now, but I think that, there's obviously many schools of thought of this. It's like, it's going to put us out of business. Everyone's going to do it. It's launch their own websites, things like that. I'm trying to look at it as a way to find efficiencies first and foremost, because you can barely predict it out 1 year, let alone 5 years. So very difficult to make those adjustments, in your own business today based on like a 1 year to 5 year prediction with AI. But what I know now is like there are some efficiencies to be had. Mm-hmm. Are you leveraging those efficiencies in the business? Most importantly, have you heard from your clients at all saying, hey, can we incorporate AI, or here's what I'm doing with AI? If at all, in your business?
Yeah, we're definitely incorporating it in our business for efficiencies, like you said, like where we just started using a code editor that has AI built into it. Certainly all the marketing activities that we do, we'll do a lot of AI to help speed that up, like research and idea generation, that sort of thing. And yeah, I think a good number of our clients use AI also. I mean, we typically work with marketing departments, so like our client is like a marketing manager or a marketing leader, and they're pretty clued into AI as well. So they're using it kind of in similar ways that we are. As far as, where we are now and where we might go, like the way I see it in the next maybe year or so is, like you said, there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained. Basically, the people who figure out how to leverage AI the best are going to benefit the most from it. Like, I don't see it replacing anybody quite yet. Where it goes long term, I'm not exactly sure. Because, like, in theory, it's going to get to a point where it can build, design, write all the copy, a website for you, pretty much do everything. But if it's doing that for everybody, then what makes the difference between website A and B? And that's right. Not exactly sure how that shakes out. It seems like there still would need to be some humans in there working with it to make sure that it's different.
Yeah, I think this is just my prediction, but like I know at least in what I'll call my side hustle, here at the WP Minute, and just like thinking as like a content publisher, somebody who's never done any, like I've never done any content for SEO. Like there's never been an SEO strategy. I've never been like, how I'll get more readers to my website and to my newsletter? I will write 17 most popular slider plugins for WordPress. And listen, I say that also understanding that I have friends who have made a lot of money doing that kind of thing. But as a publisher in this day and age, like you can't just have a podcast. You can't just have a YouTube channel anymore. Mm-hmm. It has to be omni-channel. It has to be social. It has to be the podcast. It has to be YouTube. It has to be the newsletter. It has to be the blog. It has to be community around that. And it has to be like events. It's like 7 things now, I think, in order to survive. Right. And I think like on the agency side, when you start to like democratize a lot of this stuff and say like, oh, now I can just do this with AI and it'll solve this pain point for me. The agency owner has to think of like, how can I bring as much human into this solution as possible? Yeah. And that's not even just, I think in the short term, it might just be like, how do I relate with this customer more human? And how do I do like more white glove approach for this customer? But like, do you also live in your customer's world? Like you might have to get, not you specifically, but agency owners might have to get much more vertical with like, where do the events that your customers go to? How can you live and consume that life as much as they do in order for you to be able to sell them a website now? Right. Get them to like sign a contract. I mean, you could argue that you kind of have to do that today-ish, but you almost have to be like an influencer in their space just to get just to get the job in the future, to stand out from, the row of people who are just doing this stuff, just like with AI and pumping it all out.
Right.
That's a crazy prediction, but it could be the unscalable thing is what's going to work effectively in the long run.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. I mean, like right now we do a lot of work, and we've worked with them for a long time. A company that does protein mass spectrometry, I think is how you pronounce it, which I have a very high level understanding of what it is. It's like analyzing proteins for research, but I couldn't tell you much beyond that.
Yep.
And right now it works. It's fine. We can do enough where we can, help them grow their business. But I could see a place in the future where they're only going to want to talk to somebody who really understands that deeply, attends the same events, knows how to talk to scientists the same way, that sort of thing. So I could certainly see it going in that direction.
Yeah. Coding with AI, yes or no? Something that you're trusting, not trusting, experimenting with? Where do you land on that?
Yeah, we're actively experimenting. I mean, certainly there's some small things we've had pretty much just written by AI. I mean, obviously you have to do testing, and it's, in my experience at this point, like you have to know coding, like what you're coding in to a certain point, even just to get it to produce like the code that works. Like I was having it write some JavaScript for like a HubSpot landing page, and even having it write that JavaScript took a fair amount of work in telling it what wasn't working and what to look at and like those details. So I don't think it's quite there yet, but again, it's a force multiplier. Like the places we are using it, it's speeding things up quite a bit. And it seems like the quality of the code is only getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you can think about the future. I mean, this is what excites me about it is like the AI at some point, if it doesn't already, will know and understand every single line of code that's in something like WordPress. So its ability to write the most efficient code is going to far surpass anything that we can do. Yeah.
Yes, I agree that we're going to get to that point. I have a little bit of doubt on how efficient we think it's going to be based on like the pace that we've seen improvement. Like I think we went from like, I'm not some kind of like AI absolutist or some, somebody who pretends to have like covered the space deeply, but certainly have been like really pushing myself into it for the last 6 to 8 months. Like the rapid development from like ChatGPT version 1 to where we are today, like it went pretty fast. Like 1 to 2 was like mind blowing, 2 to 3 was mind blowing, 3 to 4 was it was mind blowing, but maybe just not as much. And now it's starting like to shrink. It's the iPhone effect, right?
Yeah.
iPhone 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You're looking at like iterative improvements, year after year. And if you're just looking at it in a yearly thing, you're like, not much changed. But if you looked at it in like a 4-year window, you're like, wow, there was like a big gap of improvements. Because I'll tell you, man, I've been building, just as an aside, I've been building a lot of things with AI, but I've been messing around with building my own podcast player, web-based podcast player.
Yeah.
And it will just destroy code in the matter of seconds. Like I'm using Cursor the other day, and like it gets to this point of complexity. And maybe this is where now I have to be a better like Cursor developer.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Like you have to be like a better cursor / prompter to improve in these areas if you don't know like the code, where you almost start thinking, maybe I should just learn the code, man.
Right.
Like maybe I should just learn the code and I wouldn't have to do what I'm doing over here. But, I won't bore you with like the complexities, but in order to access the Apple Podcast API for CORS policies, you must have these on, I'm using Cloudflare workers, right? To make the API request, sanitize the API request, and send it back to the React app, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll just be like something won't work. And I will say, like, I just had this the other day where suddenly like thumbnails weren't loading for like CORS errors, CORS, for those of you who have never heard that before. And so I'm like, hey, we got to debug this. The images aren't loading. And so I says, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to debug this in your Cloudflare worker. And if you've used Cursor before, it'll show you the lines of code it's changing per request as it's like going through, as the AI agent is going through. And all of a sudden I see my Cloudflare worker file say minus 600, right? Which is minus 600 lines of code. Right? And then it says plus 2. And I was like, whoa, I have to like hit the stop button and be like, and then like literally prompt it and say, what are you doing to the worker file? You have removed everything from the worker file. You cannot do that. I need you to debug just the images. And then it just comes back and it says, oh yeah, you're right. I was just testing it for, like literally, like it says, oh yeah, you're right. I was just testing it for the images. Let's add the code back. And it's just like, what the hell were you doing? In what world was it right to remove all of that functionality just to get this image thing right? Just figure out the image thing. Don't destroy everything else. Which I guess, there are ways to do this in Cursor that says like, don't make any like impactful changes. But then what does that do? Does it add like a ton of overhead to your code that you don't know about? So it's a long rant of saying like, yeah, these things are pretty cool. I can make some pretty cool things really quickly. But then a lot of this stuff breaks down once you get to a certain size of AI project.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my exact experience as well. Like, and that's why I was saying you still kind of have to know what it's doing to point it in the right direction and give it the right prompts. Because I've experienced the exact same thing. Like one small thing isn't working, I tell them it's not working, and it completely changes everything and breaks like 3 other things. I'm like, no. Like, here's the issue. And the more descriptive I can be about the issue and kind of point it in the right direction, the more effective it is. But yeah, using it right now to completely build an app without some technical knowledge of the programming language and what needs to be done, I think you're really going to struggle. I don't know how effective that's going to be.
Yeah. One last thing about the AI stuff, and we'll wrap up this conversation about starting and surviving in an agency world and why would you do it? I was talking to an agency owner the other day, a really well-known agency owner, and he made a remark that said, I could replace my entire marketing team with some of the stuff that AI is doing today. True or false, do you think you can just replace a whole marketing team? And at least for marketing a WordPress agency, do you see any efficiencies or anything to be gained by leveraging AI to help us get found for our clients?
Yeah, well, I'm skeptical that you could remove an entire team at this stage and still produce quality content. I think we're still at a point with like a lot of the content or like what's being put out from AI where it's pretty noticeable. Like I can really tell if something's been written by ChatGPT unless it's been like rewritten. But certainly I could see it preventing you from having to hire people. Like you could probably get more done with fewer people, at least from my experience. I mean, I could be completely wrong. They might have found some better way to use it than me. But from my experience, yeah, I think it's a good, again, a force multiplier. Like you can get a lot more done. And kind of touching on one of the things you're talking about earlier about like how many channels you have to really be engaged in these days. I think that's a really good use case for AI in marketing. I forget who coined the term, but somebody said that SEO is no longer search engine optimization. It's search everything, everywhere optimization. Like you kind of need to be everywhere because people are looking for information everywhere. And I think that's one of the places that AI is really, really effective. Like you can create one original piece of content with the assistance of AI, like as long as it's not creating it, completely for you. And then it's really good about turning that into other pieces of content. Like if you haven't seen the recent Sora enhancements from OpenAI, I mean, its ability to create like an infographic is incredible. So like just feeding it like a prompt based on your content and it producing an infographic that you can put on, social is a really good use case for it.
Yeah. Ross Johnson, thanks for hanging out today. Where can folks go to say thanks? Where can they find you on the web?
Again, I think just our website's a good spot, 3.7designs.co. I'm not on X or Blue Sky these days as much, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with any other WordPress professionals. Just search for Ross Johnson and find the one Ross Johnson that works for 3.7 Designs.
If you want to find other WordPress professionals, join the WP Minute Slack. You know you can do it for as little as $5. Join the WP Minute Slack, thewpminute.com/support. Join other WordPress professionals there. Help support the show. And if you want to be a sustaining member, $79 a year, you get access to membership events kicking off in April with our April webinars headed this week. April 3rd, we'll have customer support. Does not have to suck. I agree. That'll be a webinar for members only. And then we will have other webinars scheduled throughout the year. thewpminute.com/support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.